I'm going to call the meeting of November 8th to order. Let's begin with a roll call.
Certainly. Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Potches,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Bryce,
Here.
Ms. Jordan Byron,
Present.
Mr. Mushak.
Here.
I see Ms. Tabachnik,
Here.
Ms. Wells,
Here.
and I believe I got everybody but the chairman.
Here.
I think that's it.
Okay. There's no seating necessary this evening. This is a special meeting. 2023-19 R/M Planning and Zoning Commission zoning text amendment for complete rewrite of the zoning regulations and map amendment for complete rezoning of the entire city. The first item is the letter from the Conservation Commission.
Sure, and I'll pull that up on the screen, Mr. Chairman, and we did invite Mr. Clockey from the Conservation Commission to chat with us about that letter, as well as the other sustainability item, which I think is the second item on the agenda. So give me a second, I'll pull that up.
Okay, thank you.
Do you need me to blow that up a little bit?
Oh, yes.
Okay. How's that?
That's fine.
All right. So I'm going to just scroll down. I mean, staff really had no objections to, any of the suggestions or comments that were contained within the memo. The first item really deals with, we have kind of a metric in there of 25,000 square feet as the kind of cutoff where we would look at requiring solar and other initiatives on that for rooftops for a building footprint. Didn't have a chance to, we were going to pull up some building comps. We didn't have a chance to get that done unless you found one. I didn't have a chance to look any further. But kind of a point of reference, like a good size pharmacy, that's probably a similar floor plate of that 25,000 square feet. So the question really for the commission on this first item is the 25,000 square foot size too large? Would you like to see that lowered? And what's a good number you think is appropriate?
I mean, I thought they had a good suggested language there on page 2, the top of page 2. What is it? It's like going down to 5,000 square feet and 100% coverage. Everyone knows where I stand on being more aggressive on this stuff than not. My only question, Steve. Oh, you're both Steve K. I can't do this. I hate it.
You're both Steve K, which makes it even worse. So.
Conservation Steve.
Yeah.
At least 4 kilowatts of a photovoltaic system. How much is that actually generate? Does that translate into like actual savings, like vis-a-vis like 10 cars off the road, 20 cars off the road? Like, is there any metric that like a comparison there?
The one I'll give you, I don't have a comparison for cars, but I will say that on my house I have 8.64 kilowatts, and it's a 2,400 square foot house, and it's pretty aggressive as far as being efficient, and we are roughly 15% net positive. So let's say if you were to do that much on a typical size house, you'd probably maybe break even. Yeah, roughly. So 4 is small. 4 is probably not enough to keep. It's definitely not enough to keep your average house, net zero. Let's say.
I have a problem with the 100%. I mean, obviously, buildings have all sorts of things on their roofs, whether they're chimneys or in some cases air conditioning equipment and other such equipment. So I'd like to see that number shrunk. I'd like to see it more like 85 or 90% so that we don't get into arguments with property owners over that issue.
Yeah, that's a really good point, if you don't mind me jumping in.
No,
The
no.
language that I think we're referring to in that accelerator.nyc link is what is the city's language, New York City's language, and they do include carve-outs for mechanical equipment. I don't know if they include carve-outs for fire access and whatnot, but it's not technically 100%. It's 100% of the roof that you can fit something on that something's not already covering, if that
Right.
makes sense.
I understand.
But yeah, that maybe watering it down a little bit does, build in a little bit of wiggle room.
Well, what if we were to change that to 90%? The rest of the wiggle room is already built in. That seems fair to me. And then the other question is the 5,000 square feet. I don't really have a problem with that. How do the other members of the commission feel about that change to 90%?
Mike here, I don't have a problem with it at all. I think that considering it's not just for solar, but it's for a cool roof system, that's simply doing a white, light colored roof. It's not onerous, and I think that'll translate better into actually making a difference. So I think the 5,000 square feet is fine.
Okay.
Lou, I'm not understanding the 10% delta between 90 and 100. Like the embedded rules, sorry, my watch talked to me, has the carve outs that you're worried about. So effectively it'd be someone does 90% of their roof and leave 10% of it untouched, not related to the mechanicals or anything like that. What's the impetus there?
Well, I mean, what happens in the case where a building has a relatively flat roof, and you may want to have a pathway through that so that you can access the materials that are up on the roof. When we designed the transit district building on Wilson Avenue, we have a walkway that gives you access to the heating and cooling equipment up there. I certainly don't want to deny that.
No, I totally get what you're saying.
Okay.
Conservation, Steve, is that part of the carve outs or?
I don't know.
I was just going to say the language in the link there is referring to New York City Local Law 9294, and their language is actually buildings must cover all available roof area. So I think it's important to build in a little bit of gray area here to give applicants a chance at least to explain why they maybe don't want to do 100%. So I think access ways are perfectly justifiable to not cover up. Again, fire access, there's all kinds of reasons not to cover 100% of the roof area. So I think if maybe even just inserting the term available roof area, which seems to work for New York City, may be the right fit.
Because the available roof area would prevent someone from, say, having like a black roof, for example, right, as opposed to a cooler material or option, right? So the available mitigates that piece, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, yeah. I mean, could they have a black pathway on a white roof? I mean, I suppose they could, but I mean that gets into where you're able to work back and forth with them and come up with a something that works for everybody,
Yep. Do we have any language that requires like HVAC on the roof to be grouped together? I've seen on some applications where all the HVAC equipment's together and some of it's like spread out quite a bit throughout the roof. So in thinking about how access pads and equipment on the roof may like impact the actual coverage, we may ask for 100%, but we may only see 50% after all of the equipment's accounted for.
Yeah, I think it's probably a best practice that you could include in language. But as far as telling people where they get to put their rooftop units is too far,
Okay.
in my opinion.
And really the roofing system is always underneath, it's done first and then the utilities are added on top. And I think that a lot of times they're especially on a flat roof, because you don't want to impede drainage, the pitch is underneath, goes right underneath all the equipment. And the original pitch is maintained. So you're not really, if you're adding utilities on top of a roof, you should be going on top of the roofing system. It's not going to be replacing the roofing system. So I don't think that matters. We do require, I remember this, just to bring it up on Waypoint, for instance, when that was approved, because again, I'm an old timer. I remember that 13 years ago. The original Waypoint, we talked about, we required screening of the utilities on the roof with fencing, because you see it from Norwalk Hospital. And we didn't want people to look out from the hospital and just see all those air conditioners on the roofs. And I think that was effective. But if the rooftops are visible from another building or another point, we do require screening. But I wouldn't want to limit any. Those are usually located in places that make sense. And you could actually be working against energy efficiency by requiring maybe all the utility, heat pumps, et cetera, to be in places that require further runs, let's say, or more ductwork, or the engineers are going to figure that out. And I don't think we need to get it weighed into that in terms of location. Although, with all due respect, I think it's a great suggestion, Chapin. But I don't.
Yeah, that's a great counterpoint, Mike. Thank you.
All right, look, we've got a lot of material we've got to cover. Let me try my question a different way. Is there anyone who has an objection to moving the number down to 90%? And if not, we'll just move on to the next item and ask the staff to incorporate similar language into the new regulations.
Lou, you're saying 90 and 5,000 square feet?
Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Okay,
with
cool.
5,000.
I'm here. No.
Yes, I don't understand why 90, not 100, but I'm not gonna quibble.
Just a little extra wiggle room, Galen.
Wiggle for what purpose?
Uh,
I don't get it. I mean,
Well,
how
what
does,
if we want to use the language instead of 90, or what if we take away all the percentage and say as much as available? And then we can have the conversation around what's available or not.
Yeah, I
Is
could.
that better practice? Steve, or Conservation Steve, clap in.
Yeah, I think that the percentage, I would remove the percent and then just use the all available roof area not required for mechanical space, access, whatever. And if we see a plan that comes in that looks very suspicious, like they've, purposely spaced out all the units or whatever they have on the roof all over the place, so they don't have to provide any, then I think we consult with the building department or our third-party reviewer to say, what are they doing here? That looks like they're trying to pull a fast one.
Okay, I'm good with that. Is there anyone who is not good with that? Okay, then let's move on to the next item.
So next one is, this is a new standard within the regulations, which we don't have now. And this really mainly deals when you're talking about, single family, 2-family residences, where it'll probably be the most impactful. What happens now oftentimes is you have, within older established neighborhoods, when a house flips, that house may get torn down and a new house gets built, and the developer will tend to bring in material to raise the grade on their property, which ends up shedding water onto neighboring properties. So we put in standards in the regulations to deal with those kind of things. The Conservation Commission is requesting that we consider dropping that language down to from 100 cubic yards of material down to 50, and the disturbance area of 5,000 down to 1,000. Staff doesn't have an objection to either of these changes.
Steve, just explain to us, the cubic yards. What does 50 cubic yards roughly represent?
It's probably about 5 triaxles, which is a good sized dump truck full of material.
Okay, so it's a lot of material.
Yeah, on a small lot, that could be a lot of material, depending on the lot.
All
For
right,
reference, we wanted to go lower, but Alexis advised us that we didn't want to be in conflict with Chapter 97. It would be good to be consistent, and so that's where we landed, is at 50.
okay. There anyone who objects to that language?
No, this makes sense.
Okay, then let's move on to flood hazard.
Flood hazard, they are talking about, and this is a small, but interesting change to talk about for the flood hazard overlay zone. Instead of just requiring BFE +1, looking at requiring BFE +2.
Well, you know that this has been an issue for me for some time, that we're seeing flooding at greater levels and with greater frequency than we have in the past. And so I think boosting it up at least a foot makes a lot of sense to me.
I think we've also seen public comment that has asked us to consider 2 feet above. So I'm also in support of this.
Would that make non-conforming increases?
Yeah, so anything built to BFE +1 technically would be legally non-conforming.
Would that affect, you think that, well, you might not know this, but I wonder if that would affect their flood insurance applications? If
we can
it's
find
out
out
of
about
compliance with the local ordinance?
when you asked the question, I knew that was going to be your second question, and I knew I didn't have an answer. So I can find that out probably tomorrow.
Yeah, I really wouldn't want to create hardships, since the 100-year floodplain is, big chunks of Rowayton and all of Marvin Beach, and we can go on, but, big parts of South Norwalk, that it would be, we just want to make sure, Harborview, for instance, we don't want to add hardship if it's going to create a problem for.
But Mike, haven't we already done that when we insisted on going even a foot above? We
Well, the foot,
made people non-conforming who didn't meet that 1 foot mark.
well, but our standard is right now 1 foot, so I think there's a significant number of structures that have adhered to that. When did FEMA raise that? It was about 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I can't recall right now, but
yeah, 2016, I think.
Yeah, I remember it went up. So yeah, I mean, but I just don't want to create that there's hardships already in our, that we're fixing, but we were made aware of that, in the last few meetings of the the timeline of when you go back to improvements, really created almost an impossible situation for people to improve their homes. If they were out of compliance with those limits. So I think it's worth, we don't have to decide on this tonight. I think it's just worth seeing if it has an impact on insurance. I think that's a question probably maybe to the DEEP or to FEMA.
Yeah, well, we can ask our local flood expert tomorrow, get an answer.
Yeah, I just don't want to, I don't want to have a backlash here, from we're trying to avoid that, right? I mean, that's what our streamlining is intended to do. But it makes, on the other hand, I support the 2 feet above flood level. Makes sense. It's just do we create a class of homeowners that are going to be aggrieved, have a grievance as a result. So anyway,
Next one related to CAM. Some suggestions in there. I don't see a hard recommendation. I think there's some complications with a couple of the suggestions there that I don't. I think the idea of like removing the seawalls is nice. I don't see any homeowners doing that. I think that would be something that could really impact somebody's flood insurance if you took away their seawall. So I don't see that as something that's feasible, even though I think, the idea of living shorelines and allowing, water to go where water wants to go makes sense in some instances, but I see that being problematic on a lot of properties if we tried to enforce something like that.
Is there anything we can do with sort of that third base or the third bullet there? Maybe this is more with the circus stuff coming down the road of like encouraging more. I don't know what the right word is. I'm not get the right word here. I just think of like coastal sponges is the only thing that I can think of, like areas that help take up the water or reduce flooding in a way that is more impactful than what's currently happening. Because right now it's plants and plants, basically. Obviously with the water district stuff, like the more green space requirements going to be helpful. I just don't know if there's anything else we can do here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, the more traditional ways you deal with this is like typically with a single family CAM application. So I don't know if that's the appropriate, but maybe there are. I'm not aware of any that would be directly applicable to something like that. That's a little harder way to apply that.
and I recall it may have been the last meeting or that we were meeting a special meeting where we were talking about inland wetlands and not impeding flood storage water on the side of rivers and streams. That was inland wetlands. I just remember reading that language and something. Does anybody else recall that?
No, I don't.
All right, I was just reading that somewhere, trying to maintain floods, not filling in flood zones. I don't know where I saw that language, but it was just came up in one of our discussions.
Steve, did you want to say something? I'm sorry, Steve Clocky.
Thanks. I was going to ask about the first bullet about establishing a building setback from average high tide. I didn't have a heavy hand in this comment, so I'm just looking actually for a little more education maybe than anything. But what is it now? How far back do people have to be if they're on the coast from average high tide? And by pushing it back, does it open the door to doing softer treatments to the seawall rather than hard ones? Because obviously you build a wall, you want to build the house right up to it as close as you can. Whereas if you don't have the wall, you want to build farther back, naturally. And by the way, the other thing to think about is, what is going to happen with some bigger properties of around the sound like Manresa, for example, which I'm sure nothing's going to happen overnight there, but eventually there's going to be a whole lot of stuff built there. It's just bound to happen.
Brian, I'm not positive what the impacts of that would be. I don't know, you have any thoughts? I know you used to more familiar with the CAM apps.
Yeah, I'm reading it now, and I mean, so there is the inclusion of a lot of these things, but I think maybe what conservation was looking for is a little bit stronger language. So, like for example, within the CAM regulations, it has that the commission has under your authority to look at restoration or creation of a coastal habitat, shoreline restoration, utilizing living shoreline techniques to provide more shoreline protection and managing coastal resources and habitat. Reasonable mitigation measures and techniques which include or but not limited to provisions for upland migration of on-site tidal wetlands, and then removal of existing shoreline flood and erosion control structures. So a lot of that is captured into the regulations now. So that's all under your consideration. So if someone were to come in with a CAM application, all of that could be things that you ask for or want.
We don't often ask for that stuff.
This is this is not included in the existing regs. That's why yeah.
Gotcha. So it's in the new okay. So I was like, that sounds pretty great, because I mean a lot of the coastline is with the single family homes in the area. Like just calling it out, it is what it is. It's not the big apartments, it's the homes, and that's where the floods are going to happen first. And okay, that sounds pretty good.
I remember about 10 years ago, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, discussion about increasing the setback from the high tide, you know, on coastal properties. And there was a huge backlash from developers and homeowners. I mean, they came out in force. And so I just remember that this is a hot button issue. But I don't know if we have enough information right now to discuss the building setback, but all of it was intended to create just more buffer, you know, what we've already discussed, and it all made sense to me on paper.
I think it may come down to, you know, the few versus the many. You know, the more restrictions you have on where the water can go, the more extreme the effects are in where the water goes. And where the water goes, what are those spaces? I mean, is it Veterans Park? Is it, you know, public spaces, or, you know, that are taking the brunt of impacts from private, you know, rights, basically, or private property owners' rights. I don't feel strongly about this one either. I'm just, you know, theorizing.
We're just starting to get into a lot of study of the kind of the coastal areas and you know, sea rise impacts now. So I think, you know, I don't think this is the end of the discussion, whether you guys include language or just leave the language as is. I think we're kind of at the very beginning of that discussion right now.
That sounds good.
And the last bullet point on the page talks about the Circa had recommended looking at a overlay zone, you know, potentially in South Norwalk for coastal resilience. We actually met with Circa last week to talk about that. They didn't have any concrete ideas, but they're going to circle back with some more of their staff and see what's possible. And I think we're going to meet with them either next week or the week after to further the discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody's monitoring the Q&A, but there is a question in there.
Yeah, if it's from the public since we have a new ID, technically, I'm not sure if it is, but we're technically not in a public receiving section. We probably have to disable the chat for going forward on meetings, but we can, if you want to look at it, it's fine, but typically we don't if it's not a public hearing.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments on that? If not, we should be moving on.
There was one on street trees. Just would point out with that we are in the middle of the complete streets plan that TMP is working on. So I think we probably hold off on whatever.
Yeah, I think we pretty much agreed. We'll go with whatever they recommend.
I think it was just that the language was missing from a couple of districts. That's all.
Okay.
It's not included in the hospital, marine, commercial, and civic. I think maybe it's just an oversight.
All right, well, let's look into that. And if it's just an oversight, let's correct it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would support including that language in all the districts. I can't imagine any reason why you wouldn't.
Yeah, and Mike, I assume you support native species and invasive species.
Yes.
Yeah, that language. That makes perfect sense too.
And this might be the last one. Yes, the last one about EV charging stations. Staff didn't have any issues with allowing the chargers to kind of be in the front setback area, or, you know, that's typically, you don't want to see a lot of stuff in the front yard, but that's something like that. I think they're pretty low profile and it kind of makes sense. And if it's something that helps facilitate additional charging stations, then, you know, makes sense to us.
Do we have anything that would limit the town's ability to add chargers for like street parking spots?
wouldn't be in the zoning, but that'd be something that
Okay.
probably would need to get thought about when they repave and redo the streets and they're gonna run electric lines for light poles. Do they want to, have that infrastructure ready if and when they decide to add those chargers?
Gotcha.
I wonder if we shouldn't suggest to TMP that it be an issue they review as part of their complete streets.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Also, they could, there are programs where the person using the charging station can get charged for it. So the city's not providing electricity just everywhere. If you want to charge your car, you can pay for the use of the charging station for however long you use it.
Oh, absolutely. I personally never assumed that this would be free of charge. Any more than provision of gasoline is free of charge.
But most places where the EV chargers are available, it's free. Like if you go to like 95 gas stations, where the chargers are, they are made available.
No,
And-
95 ones charge. All those Tesla
Oh, they
chargers are all charging.
Oh, okay.
You just don't see it. It's all done
Okay.
in
I
the
think
car.
correctly.
And from what I understand, they're charging above the going rates for electricity in the area. It actually ends up
Being a
being
profit
a profit center for them.
Oh, then by all means, then we should get on with the program.
Steve, back to the issue of having these in the front setback. I don't have any natural objection to having the chargers there, but that also means the cars are going to be there.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I think it's a good question.
Just for reference, our understanding was that it would be a car parked in a driveway. So if the parking spots were located behind the house, obviously there has to be a driveway to get back there. And so people would be parking in their driveways, but the car would be, either at the side or toward the front of the house, however far the cord reaches from the charger. Just
I mean,
for context.
I don't understand why we can't, particularly for the private homes, why we can't simply insist that the charging stations be located where they park their cars. They have to park their cars in a place that is permitted by the zoning regulations, so that the charging station needs to be in that area.
It may be cost prohibitive for some folks to be able to make that run to put the proper conduit and electrical needed to put that charger in their backyard or detached garage or whatever it may be. It may be more cost effective for them to put it along the side of their house, maybe, or maybe their front. I'm trying to imagine the front of their house, but I could see the side of the house being more applicable there.
I don't think this is a problem if somebody's building new construction, because I don't think that adds any cost at that point. But I think it's dealing with existing properties that have, we talked about that quite a bit, where they have zero parking or almost no parking. The parking's already non-conforming. Do we care if they put an EV charger in the front where it's visible? I would, from that perspective, I wouldn't have any problems with it.
Mhm.
And those smallers, they're very small chargers. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, if the car is in the front while it's being charged, that doesn't mean it gets to park there all the time. It gets to be charged at the charging station.
We can add like a little kind of caveat to that to say for, within existing residences or something like that. Kind of similar to what we did with the existing non-conforming parking situation. So it's the new construction's got to conform. Existing construction it's not applicable.
Okay, why don't you provide us with language on that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
And
good.
let me just bring this up. I wanted to ask if anyone was aware of the fire at Sono Collection and one of their EV chargers. And
Oh,
someone said there was a fire dispatch notice for a fire at an EV station. That's all I know. Does anybody know anything about that? Because if we're gonna require EV charging in garages, in any of this language, is there a fire hazard? I don't know anything about it. I don't have an electric vehicle, but is it safer to be outside than inside? Does
There was
anybody
a
know?
fire, and I believe the charging stations are still down there. I saw somebody on Facebook asking like when they're gonna be back up, that there's nowhere to charge in the area or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's more than I knew, but I don't. Anybody else have any information on that?
No, I haven't heard anything, but I would be very interested in what was the cause of the fire. It may not be related to the actual charging station.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it was somebody was trying to charge their phone on the EV. All right, and that's all. I didn't mean to
Okay,
go down that path, except I wondered if anybody knew anything about potential fire hazards. It's
okay.
probably worth looking into.
Steve, does that close this out?
There's just one more there that they are asking, that in addition that the, about making the other parts of the site EV ready,
Mhm.
which makes sense. I think that we talked about that with Wegmans quite a bit when they were talking about that, it doesn't have to mean they install the stations, but they have the infrastructure ready if and when there's demand or requirements increase.
Does infrastructure mean doing like conduit runs and things like that, but not necessarily the wiring and such?
Yeah, it's the conduit making it ready, but not installing the stanchions or the actual device or
Gotcha.
posts, those kind of things.
Okay.
And I believe that's what the last applicant that we had will be doing, right? At the public housing, that they will have the EV ready.
Yeah. Okay. So similar, but different. And I don't know if I sent Steve Clocky, I know I sent you an earlier version of this. I don't know if I sent you the last, I kind of tweaked it after your email. So this is kind of a requirement. Again, you guys just talked about the 25,000 square feet. So that would probably,
It'll apply
be
here too,
pertinent
to
to this
5,000.
discussion. Yeah, it may not be the same number for this. Maybe it's the different number, but this is a kind of some modified language.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so the first line, the first sentence there, shall demonstrate that the construction methodology of the structure is either certifiable as, and then there's the bullets of listing all the programs. Why, and before you had building type is eligible for. This again is sort of just a reworking of that same concept where it doesn't actually, the construction methodology is not a term that I think lends itself well to explaining to people, oh, we need you to actually certify the building or certifiable. Yeah, so that terminology is a little
Did you see this line here?
yeah. Yeah, proof of,
The
yeah.
one above number 2?
Yep. And it's not, is it construction or is it certification? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, my opinion is I don't really care about the certification. I care about if it is consistent with the standards and built to that way. Whether
Right.
somebody goes on LEED, I've got my accreditation. That's a whole nother process, which I'm not as worried about. I'm worried about what actually gets built.
Okay.
So then wouldn't
So,
it be like proof of, oh God, I just lost the word. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
no, I'm sorry, I started talking without.
No.
What, I don't remember what I had
I mean,
suggested.
again, feel free to wordsmith this.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my email that I sent.
Yeah, I tried to take what you put and put it into something that I thought was workable. So I mean, I'm not married to this, so if you have, again, my point is I don't want to require
People to do it.
developments to have to go through some kind of certification process where they go and whether, no matter what the tip, you know, whether it's the lead or passive house, I don't think they have to go through the program as long as somebody says this development, somebody that's putting a stamp with a license on a piece of paper is saying that this project as built is consistent with those standards. That, to me, that's more important.
Okay,
just so-
yeah,
So proof that project is consistent with one of the above standards in
Right.
writing.
Correct.
I would say must be certifiable under one of the following standards. I'm just looking at Somerville, Massachusetts language. They say new construction or modification of any building type greater than 25,000 square feet in gross floor area must be LEED Gold certifiable. That's what they chose. And it's LEED Platinum for 50,000, but you could just say must be certifiable under any of the following programs.
But that, I'd have to read theirs and look at it next to ours. It seems like it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think you would just
If-
delete the demonstrate that the construction methodology of the structure is either you would just say 25,000 square feet or more shall be certifiable as, and then there you go.
Yeah. Yes,
Well, does that sit, I mean, only thing that's a problem with that language is says shall be certifiable. To me, almost sounds like I have to get it certified. Versus demonstrating that it's the same thing.
So that's the that's the email I
Why?
wrote to you, and maybe not everyone else is aware of, but that's the constant trouble that we always run up with as people who are required to be hired in order to actually certify a project. Certifiable just means that it's designed to a standard. It's not actually the project's not actually expected to certify, which includes a whole bunch of extra verification, so that the pre-approval stage of a project is typically much smaller than, you know, the rest of the project where the actual work is done. So if it was that you were more concerned about it actually happening, then you don't want the word certifiable, you want certified.
Well, so what if you say shall be designed and built? Because then you're saying you have to build it too. And then somebody's saying at the end, yes, it was built to these standards.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give you an example. So LEED made this big push over the past few years to go international, which I think that was a mistake because they took their eye off the ball here in the US. But regardless, they did a whole bunch of gymnastics over issues like this, where, you know, here in the US, LEED requires Energy Star certification for the building. But you can only certify an Energy Star building in the United States. How are they going to do that in India or China or whatever, right? And so that's where that's just one example of the gray area that happens when you start requiring, and when you just aren't very careful about your language, is all I'm trying to say. So the certifiable thing works in the beginning, and then there's another line that you can add, which is exactly what you're highlighting here: proof of actual construction, you know, must be confirmed in writing. I wouldn't say by a licensed architect, because they, no offense, typically don't know these programs as well as like a consultant would. So the raters and the verifiers are the people who will actually support these certifications. So if you're doing passive house, you've got to hire a passive house certified, you know, consultant, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to see if there's any language in Somerville that would.
Yeah, I mean, I just started with an architect because I figured they
Yeah.
would be but I'm.
Yeah, I'm not trying to beat you up because I am an architect too. I'm just saying it
Yeah,
does need to
I'm
be.
fine with whatever the best person is that
Yeah.
to change, that's fine.
Yeah, so the language from Somerville says prior to the issuance of the first building permit and prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy, LEED checklist and narrative description outlining compliance with the certification level required by this section must be updated to identify any design changes made subsequent to the site plan approval, blah, blah, blah. And then manager or appropriate consultants must state that to the best of their knowledge, the building has been designed to achieve the stated lead building standard. Yeah, so that's again just designed. So I think they intentionally left it open, and I think a lot of people do that. Because I think what the problem is if you require certification and then someone can't certify because there was a mistake made, the building's in the wrong damn place, anything like that, it's really hard to let that go. Like, how do you fix a building that was built incorrectly, right? So maybe they do the certifiable thing as sort of a pressure relief valve. But I'm all for certifying it because that's what I get paid to do. But I can see why there's value in certifiable.
And I'm sorry, Steve, that language was a manager or appropriate professional,
Appropriate consultant.
appropriate. Well, the manager seems really open
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
to
Let me take that back.
interpretation, but
It must be accompanied by an affidavit by a lead AP project manager. So there you go.
there you
Theirs
go.
is just lead though. So they have a very finite
Right.
list of people who are qualified. If you're gonna have 5 bullet points, which I think is a good idea to have options. And I tried to suggest options that were like on the same level or relatively close
Yeah.
to each other. I think that's good, but you just need to water down the language. Or you can also say like issuance of a certificate by the certifying agency, things like that. So passive house, lead, EGC, zero insurity, homes, living, building challenge, they all have an actual like certificate at the end of the project that says this project's certified. So it could be something as simple as that.
yeah, I think that's fine. One thing we didn't, Mr. Chairman, we didn't really get into is we didn't really get into this concept overall, like what the commission actually thinks about this requirement. So I figured the language is, we can definitely massage, but what do you think of F in general?
Oh, I'm supportive of what you have here. And I hope the rest of the commissioners feel the same. Is there anyone who doesn't?
Well, let me throw this out. I support this, but there's that 25,000 square foot figure again.
Yeah.
Does that, well, that's gross floor area, so that would include multiple floors. But with that, it's not footprint like the other language was that we were just dealing with. But do we want to reduce that? What's the disadvantage of reducing it? Is it more onerous for smaller projects?
I would say that it is. There is a tipping point.
Just-
Let's go ahead, Nick.
No, so is this the tipping point you would recommend?
Well, no, I don't think I actually suggested the 25,000. Maybe I did, and it would have come from what Somerville's entry point is. But so like if you think of a multifamily building that has 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units, the average apartment size is, let's say, 1,000 square feet, maybe more. So you've got a 25 unit building. A 25 unit building, yeah. Any smaller than that, it starts to get a little bit onerous to certify. I mean, we certified single family homes. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I think that's a reasonable number. You could go a little bit lower, I suppose.
I mean, that's about it, it's gross floor area. So if you're talking, it could be, if it's 3 stories, that's, 8,000 plus or minus per floor. So that's not really large.
But like a Walgreens, that would fall under this, right? Like, aren't they like 10,000 square feet or something like that?
No, I think they're bigger.
But
I
they're
can
bigger.
check, but I think they're bigger.
Maybe we get some comparables like at a future meeting just to see what we want. Like, I totally agree with you, Mike. Like, I hate for us to miss the opportunity on this, and then not make it the right size. And I think it's obvious for folks what this is giving us is the teeth that we've been missing in special permits, but also in site plan. That's this other column on the right here. Is so with the YMCA, we wouldn't be in that spot with the YMCA because you'd have this requirement built in, which I think was really clever from staff.
Yeah, and I think, as we go through, we have, the public hearings in early December, then you're going to vote a week or so later. That, that whether that number stays at 8, that goes to 25 to 20, I don't think that's a material change to what you're looking at. I think that's something you discussed and deliberated on, that number is still in play a little bit. So I think getting you on board with the concept is the key thing, and then massaging the language and what we settle on for the actual gross floor area can get worked out over the next month.
Well, Steve,
I-
I'm not hearing anyone objecting to the concept.
Can we talk about 2 and 3 just for informative, if that's okay, Lou?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Like, my understanding, so 1 makes sense. 2 is saying 75% more of the building's energy use is obtained from the development. So does that mean like just generated on site?
Yeah, and if you want to modify that language, that's fine with me too.
And then my only concern there is in the larger projects, sorry, hey bud, calm down. Like the bigger projects, say they can't put the the larger projects have said, you know, they can fill up the whole roof, but they can only use it on like the common area versus feeding it into the units, which is that, so this is, I guess, like, I'm just trying to think of, like, do we think this is actually, someone could actually do this? Probably on smaller units or things like that. So I'm just talking out loud.
You can most certainly have a big building, let's say, it's only gonna happen on a building that is flatter than it is tall, if that makes any sense. So the taller the building, the more floor area to roof area you got, it's not gonna work. But if you have a smaller or shorter building that's wider, you can put 5 panels up for unit A, 5 panels up for unit B, 5 panels up for unit C.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And
You can do that, but it's the infrastructure. So it's all the conduit, the wiring, the electrical panel space, the inverters. You know, it may not scale.
Gotcha.
That's not our word. But you're absolutely right that, you know, most buildings around here at least are metered such that tenants pay their electricity, and it's, you know, hard to, you know, unless the owner master meters and then bills tenants for their electricity, which nobody likes to do that setup, so it's not going to happen.
And then it's just this is an or statement, so
Right.
it's you can either choose making it passive house or one of those options, or you could do the 75% of your energy production on site, or you could do 75% of your
Right.
LID.
Is the
product.
last one a cop out? I just don't know enough to, like, I worry 3 is a cop out.
I worry that too.
I don't know what both the Steves or Brian think to that one.
Why would you, I would ask back, why do you think it's a cop out?
It's, I don't know how, is it impact, like, what's the impact, like, if we would rate the impact of that versus the other, versus 1 and 2?
I mean, they're all degrees. You know, the first 2 are kind of related in terms of, you know, related around energy efficiency, but the third one is related to, you know, stormwater runoff, which has impacts on Long Island Sound, impacts on the, you know, water temperature, flooding, drainage, all those things. So it's just a different approach to trying to get more sustainability into the project.
What do we require? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say our drainage standards are a lot stricter than they used to be. As of 2018, I think, right? So the low impact LID practices would be rain gardens. That's what everybody thinks of first. But it also, you know, we require all of the stormwater up to 100 years or up to a 25-year storm, I think, to be held on site, you know, and before it's released in a storm event that's higher than that, you know, because there's an overflow pipe out of the system, and the systems are usually underground, Caltex, you know, over a gravel base that allow the water to, you know, go in, and it's not going off the site. But we have to do that anyway. So it does seem this might be a little superfluous to what our DPW standards are, which are state mandated, are would require. Do you have an opinion? Anybody have an opinion on that?
Let me check with DPW on that, and because I'm not quite positive if all those things are considered LID, and what we could do, A, we could increase the percent, B, we can spell out the LID items that we want to include versus what's already required by DPW.
That would be great. Yes. So that people don't have to go look it up.
Agreed. Yeah, my concern was similar that this was setting the bar lower than some of our other standards. So I wasn't sure if this was the easy out because they already had to do it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of background as to why there's even a option 2 or an option 3 is I don't think we can strictly require option 1. I'm not sure if we have the legal authority to do option 1. So we're saying you can do option 1 or you can do option 2 or option 3. Because option 1 is typically building code related. So I think we're coming up with a creative way to make things legal.
For option 2, one of the things we talked about at our roundtable was about community solar. I know we don't have a whole lot of like open land here in Norwalk, but and I think even in prior discussions we've talked about possibly like leasing, working on agreements with neighbors and leasing their flat roof space to put solar panels up there. Is there something in option 2 where maybe we can permit or look into some of that? I don't know if anyone has appetite for that, but for a multifamily or a larger apartment building that may not have the roof space to offset 75%, could we permit them to partner with a warehouse in town or a industrial use in town and fill their roof with solar panels, for example? I don't know, just a thought on that.
The only tricky thing with that is if they did that, they kind of like share it. But then if they redevelop that property, then they're going to fall under that same requirement for their site and put one of them out of compliance. When
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, other part of that number 2 is perhaps there's other ways beyond solar where they can achieve that 75%.
Yeah, I think of like geothermal as maybe an interesting way to to get around some of that, right? Where your heating costs are significantly reduced, your cooling costs are significantly reduced, so it reduces the amount that you need to generate on site.
Problem with geothermal is the proximity of all the houses here. We were looking into that, and because of the rigs that they have, they would need to take down trees and things. Like through my neighbors, they are like, yeah, we can do it in the back of your house, but then we are not liable if the drill were to crack your foundation or your neighbors. So
No.
you could do that in like, I don't know, like Silver Mine area, but let's say, I don't know, like more urban Norwalk probably wouldn't work.
That's good context. I wonder for a 25,000 foot building if there would be more availability for that, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be site specific, for sure.
I think Conservation Steve has been trying to say something.
You don't mind me chiming in on a few things here. The Zero Energy Ready Homes program, which is designed by Department of Energy, does have language that says you don't have to have PV on your roof if the property receives renewable energy from a community solar system and there's a legally binding agreement in place for the provision of this energy to the building with a duration of at least 15 years, which I assume maybe that's lifetime of a solar panel or something like that, and written to survive a full or partial transfer of ownership of the property. So, I mean, there is language out there that would support community solar, and if DOE published it, I think it should work for us, but we can, whatever y'all agree to is fine there. I will say that the number 3 is just a pair versus it's not even apples and oranges. It's completely different, and I think opens the door. I'm referring to the stormwater, opens the door to a big development. Just like you guys are saying, they needed to hold most of the water, and all they have to do is add couple more Coltex, and they're retaining, they're be hitting the mark. And I think that's just a stormwater versus energy I think they're completely different effects environmentally. So I think it's a good idea to try to reward that, but I wouldn't put it in the same conversation as any of these certification programs. And then on that note of the certification programs, Steve, I'd sent you two different kind of tiers of programs. And I misspoke earlier when I said, I did review these to make sure they're all about the same. These are actually all about the same, but it's actually very, very, very rigorous. These are all very rigorous standards. Like LEED 0 basically means you're producing all the information you consume on site, pretty much. Passive house is not easy to do. It's definitely doable, but it's very aggressive. Same thing for EGC plus. So, I mean, you may want to consider having a couple of tiers, the lower tier being, LEED gold or something like that versus LEED 0. But I do understand that most of these bullets do represent a primarily energy focused concern, which is great. I'm just saying it's very aggressive. These programs are all very aggressive.
What if
So-
it was certifiable as blah 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 or 75% and just make the stormwater thing part of the deal?
I think the one issue is I don't think you guys have the legal authority to require some of these to just require the
Stormwater?
no, the energy efficiency items. Those are typically building code items.
No, yeah, what I'm saying is in terms of what Chapin oh my God, baby brain. What folks were saying about item 3 being sort of abusable or something, if you just made it an and.
Right, because then you're also saying that number 1 or number 2, which are basically the same metric, are also ands.
No. We're saying certifiable or 75%. One of these two, either 1 or 2 and 3 versus either 1, 2, or 3. The way you have it right now is either 1, 2, or 3.
Right.
Making it 1 or 2 and also 3.
The only question, and then again, we probably should think about it a little more, is what we were talking about related to number 2 and the feasibility of that. Is that achievable on a lot of sites, or is it just going to be on larger sites, or how's that quite function?
Well, I like number 2 because, and then we can start thinking of these as 1A and 1B and then 2, or something like that, if that helps people. But anyway, I like the 75% because it doesn't require any sort of, you don't have to hire a consultant to achieve that. You don't have to do it any particular way, as long as you get there. And of course, you'd have to include a mechanism for proving it. Is it over a 5-year period? Is it over a 1-year period? Is it over, on a month-to-month basis? Does it provide enough 75% of the building's energy? But I think there's definitely value to providing that sort of like, all right, we don't care how you get there, just get there. 75% is 75%. Maybe it only needs to be 50. I don't know, but that's all I wanted to add about that. It's nice to have an alternative to the certification process.
Steve, I don't recall the number, but we know that SNU won't do 100%. Will they do 75%? I know we had that conversation, and I just don't remember what the percent was.
Yeah, I'm not dodging your question, Mr. Chairman. I was just thinking maybe to Steve's point about the tiered system, maybe you look at something similar to what we have, and then you drop it down to that LEED gold and comparable level, and then require 50% of something, and maybe it's a menu of the 3 with 2 tiers or different options. You can do 100% of this, or you do 50% of this plus 50% of that, and that gets you to the same point.
But clearly, there are some things here that you need to tease out. Why don't you come back to us with recommended language?
Yeah, we're back to, I think we're getting close, so we'll tease it out a little more.
Okay.
And I'm
This is
happy to
awesome
help
to see.
however you guys want me to help on that.
Sure, thank you, appreciate that.
And just, I guess a final note, I do, think number 3 is not, is, incongruous, is that the right word, with the other two? You know, it's not, it is a different kind of standard that may not belong in this grouping as an option. But anyway, we already went over that, but I just wanted to, I'm kind of agreeing with Steve Clocky on this.
But Steve, you may look for someplace else in the regulations where you can put that language in.
Okay. Yeah, okay. No, yeah, we can do that.
Okay, let's move on.
In the second half of this memo had to do with the EVTZ point system. So we sent out a modified version of the point system just to kind of, and I think overall what the modifications do is they actually, we tried to add a few more items to, you know, to fit into the mix, some of them related to sustainability, some not. But I think what it does is tightens up the point system, because there were items that you could obtain points for now that we're saying are required to be within that. And I think that was a criticism we heard through the 2 applications that you did see in East Norwalk, that, you know, why is somebody getting points for these, like the outlets and the heated, the different seating things, those should be mixed in and required as part of that. So we did remove those. I'm happy just to scroll down through and we can stop at any point in time and talk about any one of the particular items. But however you guys want to proceed is fine with me.
Steve, I have a couple of suggestions. One is that maybe we consider requiring more points. In other words, raising the bar some. And number 2, reducing some of the points. Again, raising the bar for people to achieve the additional height on the building. And I have some suggestions regarding those. For example, on the solar, I had a maximum of just 3 points.
Yeah, hold on. Let me give me just a sec to
Okay.
get there. Yeah. Does it make sense, maybe, Mr. Chairman, to start at the beginning and just work down through the table?
Yeah, probably, in case other people have specific recommendations as well.
Okay, sorry if I'm scrolling very rapidly.
It's okay.
And again, so changes are
sorry. Steve, I'm trying to sort of control F through all the feedback we've received on the rewrite and the letters, but particularly, well, I guess in general, and since you put out this memo with the proposed revision a couple weeks ago, have we received any comments from anybody, feedback online or letters with thoughts on these revisions or how to change them?
Yeah, the only one we got was, I got it late this afternoon. I haven't even opened the email yet from ENNA. I'll forward that on tomorrow. I haven't looked at it yet.
Oh, we did get, okay.
Okay, Steve, on the
Okay.
first item, the shaded public seating, my suggestion is to reduce that from 3 points to 2 points.
Is that quantified anywhere? How much? Maybe it's in that footnote 7, but I can't see what the quantity is.
Yeah, is it 1 seat? Is it 10 seats?
Right.
It says all seating.
But how many seats do they need to provide to get the 2 or 3 points?
And again, it doesn't state that keep in
Yeah.
mind, this is a special permit application, so you guys are looking at each one of these criteria and saying, no, this is not consistent with what we deem acceptable or not deem acceptable.
So we could do one seat, but
They-
also
and-
they could propose 30 seats and we could say that's not acceptable.
Right, because it's all gonna vary on the project too, because you're not, if you're dealing with a 10,000 square foot lot versus a 50,000 square foot lot, the area of seating and area of amenity space is gonna be different.
I see. And so in the case that they do provide 30 spots, we could even come back and say, we feel this is worth 2 points or 1 point. Is that right? This is just a maximum that's provided here.
Correct.
This is a little funny to me because there's a north side of a building mostly. Most buildings would have a north side, I would imagine, or out of the sun, and that would be naturally shaded. If you had a bench on the north side of a building, it would only get sun for 20 minutes in the morning, maybe 20 minutes in the afternoon in the summer, because of the sun angles. But you would almost always want your outdoor seating shaded, and that to get points for that, just to me, all of this is too ambiguous, and I would assume that everybody should shade their public seating anyway in a public space with trees, for instance. I don't see the appropriateness of adding points for this at all. How's that to shake things up?
I agree with you, Mike.
I do too.
Good evening, Tammy.
If we, so
Mm-hmm.
I understand the argument to not provide points for what people should already do. But then I would just think that then we need to explicitly require it shaded public seating, because as we've seen, people tend not to do it if it's not required.
Well, that's when the special permit kicks in, where we can make it a condition. But
Okay, so it's not required,
but
it's
they
not
wouldn't
part
be-
of the
they wouldn't be
bonus
getting a-
points amenity, but we would add it as a condition to pretty much all applications.
Well, I think most landscape architects who are going to be working, not always, but usually there's a landscape architect on a bigger project is going to naturally add seating that's going to be shaded from the hot sun. And, and it's almost a given nowadays, especially with the hotter temperatures. So I don't see that it's a point. It should even be in the point system. Because I don't recall a plaza or an outdoor public space ever coming in without trees recently. I just can't even think of one that came in, because it would be a pretty inhospitable space, I think.
I don't know if I'm just not in a trusting mood. I don't know why that's sitting with me funny, but I will lean towards trusting you.
Yeah, if a well-designed public space is going to definitely have shade available, and is what I'm trying to say. It's not. It's almost. It would be an aberration to design a space without any trees or shade structures in it that's meant for public use. It just doesn't seem. It doesn't seem like something that would earn points.
Steve Clocky, you have your hand raised.
You're muted.
Not exactly on this topic. Would you guys mind if I excuse myself for the evening, or would you?
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Okay, I wasn't sure. But this is just parting words, is that I really commend you guys for taking this, or you folks for taking this on, and it needed to be done, and I think you're doing a really wonderful job with it. And I'll speak for myself and the Conservation Commission to say that we really appreciate you engaging us, and look forward to helping as you come up with something that's going to be really, really great. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And the elected leaders, mayor last night said, we want to be the greenest city in Connecticut. So I think this is all on the right track here.
Good.
Thank you for being a part of that.
You bet. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Despite Mike's comments, I tend to agree with Anna that if we don't either incentivize it or make it a requirement, it may very well not happen. So I'm in favor either of requiring the shaded seating or of incentivizing it with some points. And I'm not wedded to either of those two.
Yeah, I think how Mike said it earlier was, if they come in and they have a north facing wall or whatever, and it's going to be naturally shaded, you can say this does not count as points and, come up with something else.
There's no requirement for them to put in a plaza, is there? In the first place?
No, they don't have to.
Yeah, so, if they have but shaded public seating, even along the side of the building, like there's this illustration of the trees and the sidewalk, etc. You could put shaded public, I don't know.
You got to think about the area we're talking about too, because it's East Avenue. So if this is in the front of the building, could be on the east side of the street. It's very possible that it's going to be westward facing. So that's afternoon sun.
Well, and also, the shaded public seating would be just to play devil's advocate here, would be an amenity that would be appropriate in Arizona or Southern California or some hot anywhere in the South. But, there's times where you want to sit in the sun and, we call it the shoulder seasons in our profession. It'd be early spring or late fall on a warm day, but it might be 50 degrees, but it seems like a warm day. You want to sit out, you want to be in the sun. You may not want a shade structure over, there's times where you do want to sit in the sun in the winter. So this all seems very ambiguous to me. That's all. It just seems like if we're going to have if it's going to be a well-designed space, it shouldn't be earning points for density.
Tammy?
Yes, hi, everybody. Sorry, I couldn't get here at the 7 o'clock. Just thinking about a couple of projects in Norwalk, for example, the big building at Washington Street that had the redevelopment agency replace the park that was there. And Mike was on the planning commission when we discussed this multiple times. So you have a big grassy area there. They did plant a few trees, and then there is seating. There are some sort of benches there. I can't say I've ever stopped and sat down there, but does that space achieve what we're trying to achieve here in the East Avenue Village District? Or think about the big apartment building that on West and Maple, they have a little public realm space. Is there space for a bench, seating? Does it have to be covered? I kind of feel like if the thing that we should suggest or mandate is that the development plant trees, because a table with an umbrella, you're not going to have a bench with an umbrella. Who's going to sort of manage those accoutrements? A restaurant that has sidewalk space certainly would want to have an umbrella because their patrons would want to sit at the restaurant and, be in the shade while they're having lunch. So I kind of think the wording ought to be for trees and not for shaded public seating. It takes a while for trees to grow, but I just feel that it might be more the goal.
There is a requirement for that down later on in one of the other criteria.
Okay, so maybe we pick it up there instead of right here.
All one for me. Oh.
Yeah, the Brim and Crown in East Norwalk has, obviously prior to the EVTZ, they have plenty of shaded, they have plenty of trees in that plaza they created, it feels like Brooklyn there. And I say that as a compliment. I mean, it feels, it's a very cool urban space that they created in the back there. And I would encourage anybody who hasn't been back there. It's by the pizza place, Magic Hat or whatever it's called. But it has that whole vibe there is really great. And all of the design details, and it includes seating and trees. And I just feel like that's all something that we should expect to be done and not to earn any points for. That's all. That's how I
It
feel.
sounds like there's sort of consensus for shaded public seating not being an amenity bonus for density. And the question is whether it's just required for the zone that any public seating be adequately shaded. And adequately is where the discretion comes in. Or whether you leave it out and you trust the developers and their landscapers to do what seems to make sense.
Well, and to say all seating, again, you want that bench for winter warmth. You want to sit in the sun.
Right,
And
that's where the word adequately comes in.
Yeah.
Does a lot of work.
Or 50% seating. But anyway, I just, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around getting points.
The
for
leaves would be
something that comes naturally to me whenever I see a public space, and you want.
I haven't heard anybody arguing that they should get points.
You see, is that the consensus? So we could move on?
It seems like it.
All right. Next one was sidewalk width. Basically, we just come in with didn't really change the points at all. We just dropped it down. If you did an 8-foot sidewalk, you can only get 1 point. And if you did a 10-foot, you get 2. So right now the standard is 2 points for 10. So we provided just a tier to that. Doesn't really impact the totals or the math at all.
The minimum required 6 feet, right?
5,
I want to say,
unless the E EVTZ design guidelines are 6.
yeah.
Usually elsewhere it's 5, but
Okay, so
5 foot minimum around the city for sure.
So 1 point for 8 is not too many points. It's also a maximum point, so.
right. And it kind of gives so before it was 10 feet are desired. So it's like if someone came in with an 8-foot sidewalk, what do you do? Do you give them 2 points or do you not? So now at least it's like you have a
Yep.
minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any other questions on this. Sorry to slow us down.
No, that's good. Next one, public art. It says something where I changed the shall to may. You may send it to the Arts Commission if you felt that you wanted comment or additional input, just not requiring you to do so. Don't think there's much there. Next one is we added in bike racks, so you get a point for adding a bike rack that's consistent with the EVTZ design guidelines. So that would be the fish one right there. So if someone puts one of those on your site, you can give them a point for that.
Is it max of 1 or 2, or do we need to specify?
We did not, but we can.
So something to consider. I don't know if anyone's gonna play game by putting 13 bike racks. But
I read that as 1 point no matter how many bike racks you put in, not per bike rack is how I was reading that.
Let me just scroll up quick. Hold on 1 sec. Yeah, total maximum points available. So yeah, it's 1. They could put 10 bike racks and they're only getting 1 point.
super.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying good. That's all. Sorry.
One thing I was thinking of, and I don't know if it's a good idea, is combining these two and making it like an or and then allowing up to 2 points. I don't know if that makes sense. I also like them separate. I don't know if anybody has any strong opinions on that.
I should point out for the bike repair station, I need to credit somebody for that photo. So if we do end up using it, I'll end up having to credit that photo.
All right, I'm good with keeping as it is. Never mind.
Okay, moving on.
What about the bike rack? Can be a bike rack for 2 bikes or 20 bikes. you know, one rack can be quite big. So do we want to say bicycle racks, minimum, you know, minimum for 5 bikes?
Yep, that's easy enough.
Yeah, I've seen bike racks for just one bike.
Can we make that minimum number 10?
That might be tight on certain spaces, though. That's the only thing I want to.
Okay, I just think of it being like 5 bars and a bike could be locked up on either side of the bar.
How about appropriate size? It kind of is vague, but might go, if you have an apartment building that has 100 units, it's going to be a different size bike rack than if you have one that only has 40 units.
The new regulations do require bike parking as well. So this would be like if you live within that, they're going to have to provide some bikes parking or bike storage within the development. This would be for public use. And they have to be in the
Sorry,
rack.
Steve, I see what you mean. Yep, sorry. I was thinking public, sorry.
Yeah.
Would you want to say public, the word public in front of bicycle rack? Or is this in language?
Put it in your.
No, we could put public in front of it. That probably makes sense. Do you want to consider putting public in front of the repair station too?
Yes.
Yep.
This is where, and this is one where we, this is where we tweak the regulation to remove some of the extra points that they could get. I'm sorry, it all doesn't fit on the one page, but basically you could get points for, and I'll just scroll down, we can go back up, but you could get points for, excuse me, sorry, the way I structured it here. You could get points for these items here, and this came up to, as I mentioned, during the 2 East Norwalk applications, you could get a point for a water filling station, Wi-Fi, powered seating, or the junction box. So what we said is you don't get points for those anymore. But you have to, depending on the size of your plaza, you have to put in the features that are required based on the size.
Clever.
Yeah. Yeah, and we tried to make it consistent between the covered one and the outdoor plaza.
So wait, the plaza now requires the Wi-Fi and the water bottle and the et cetera. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Yes, and that's down
Can you
to.
show us where that is?
Yep, right here.
Oh, they contain 2 features of the below or all 4. Okay, great. Gotcha.
Is this going to prevent developers from wanting to put in plazas greater than 2,000 square feet? Are we going to see a lot of like 1,999 square foot plazas?
Well, you know, that goes back to they've still got to achieve their total points. So they may not have a choice in that. They, you know, depending on how their site's configured, again, that comes down to the actual configuration and how large the site is, and then your discretion in terms of the special permit, whether you think something they propose is adequate or inadequate.
Thanks.
Steve, this is another one where I thought the points could be lowered from 7 to 5.
The only thing I would counter with that is, since we require the other items to be in that, but again, it's at your discretion, however you want. Again, and then also this is, you know, it's not a perfect science we're working with here. It's kind of a little bit subjective in terms of 6 points, 7 points, 5 points.
You know, again, my feeling is if they want that bonus, they're going to do these things. So why not get as much from these developers and developments as we can for the community?
Steve, can you scroll down a little bit? I just wanted to. Yeah, so if it's 1 point, I mean, technically, if we're doing math, if 1 point per 500 square feet And the max size is 5,000 square feet. It should be a maximum of 10 points technically that they could get for it, but if those wanted to align.
Yeah, so if the commission agrees with me, we'd have to adjust those numbers. I'd like to hear from others about that. If you're comfortable with the 7, this isn't an issue worth a big fight, but if you agree with me, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, let's see how it turns out going your way. Actually, I think it'd be important at the end to see what it's actually going to take to get to the 13 or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
might
then
as
the only
well.
thing I think is with number 5 is then do we reduce the max size down to 3,500 square feet?
Mhm.
Oh, change 5 to 3,500?
Yeah. I mean, it's saying
Yeah.
you could do a bigger one, but you're only going to get points up to 3,500 square feet.
Yeah, you know, plazas bigger than that are really getting. They're really getting really, I don't want to say too big, but they're getting really less urban and more, you know, a big windswept space is not always a good thing. Necessarily, it begins to feel like a parking lot.
Mike, can you tell us how big the plaza in front of the building on Washington Street is? For point
Oh
of
gosh,
reference?
well, I would say the gravel area. I mean, the overall, it's got to be 250. I'm guessing 250 feet, maybe. It's total
Yeah.
guess by 200. So what is that? 50,000?
Yeah, so that's like way
It might be
bigger.
it's
even-
over an acre. You know,
It's
at
an
least. I
acre.
think. Yeah,
That's bigger than the
that,
amenity space up on the Merit 7, up on the, new things going in there. So where do we find these other spaces in Norwalk? Especially in East
let's say
Norwalk.
that the gravel area, which is where that fountain was. Do you remember Fran hated that space, but
Yep.
it's getting a lot of use. And I just want to say for the Halloween night fair on October 28th, it was Saturday night, there were thousands of people in that space. It was great to see the park utilized, and people were using it exactly the way Eric Rains had designed it for. And I saw Eric yesterday and said, did you see that event? Because it had a big stage in the middle on the paving, and the space was full, and people were dancing on the grass, and then people were sitting on all the furniture. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. It's very well designed space, because it's adaptable for all kinds of events. But anyway, that gravel area, I would say, is more like 100 by 100. So that's 10,000 square feet. It's about 10,000 square feet. That area where the fountain is. And again, these are just guesses, but just so you can get an idea, you know the area I'm talking about. It's
Right, it just gives us a little perspective on,
yeah.
and there aren't that many spaces like that in East Norwalk.
No,
Probably
there
aren't
aren't.
any.
Yeah, but going over 35, I think 3,500 square feet might be a better, and then that sticks with the 7 points. Because you'd have to go up to 10 points if we're going to keep this, because
Yeah,
you
I
can
think
make
that makes
just the
sense.
math work.
Well, again.
That's not going any lower than the 7 that you want or suggested, Lou. But Brian just brought up that these numbers don't match, or Steve did.
Well, again, I think, the numbers are fungible. I'm not concerned about that. But if you want to stick with, as a group, you want to stick with the 7 points, then let's just move on to the next item. It's already almost 7:40, and we've still got work to do.
Well, I think they need some clarity on the 5,000 versus 3,500 maximum. I would say make it 3,500.
Yeah, that seems to make sense just from the math.
Yeah, the item, it's you're not, if you scroll up, you'll see it. It's there it is, number 5. Isn't that correct? You want to make number 5 3,500. So anyway.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
And again, this is what we deleted out as eligible points. This language in the middle on the net zero building, probably have to mimic what we just talked about when we were talking about the
Right.
who can say it's certifiable versus built that way. So I think we'd probably just tweak this language a little bit to match up with that. But this was a new concept that kind of replaced the one below.
Okay, you're going to be providing us with new language anyway, so
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody has a big problem with this in general, but I think that's trying to hit a pretty high bar. That's why the points are
Right.
high.
Totally.
And then number 6 got tweaked a little bit. And any thoughts on this? And again, this is very similar to what we just talked about. And it may be that
Now,
one
we-
may actually be moot at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say, are these moot?
Well,
because
that's a
they
less
were-
than, so that's pretty much taken everything. The
Yeah, we might drop.
Oh, that's the less than. Okay, sorry. So the other one, okay. And then
Yeah,
because
you-
we're adding it to the special permit, does that mean we don't need it in the one above, or we still need it here because this supersedes that?
The one above would be, it doesn't really get into size, and it's a higher standard, I think, overall, so.
Okay, cool. Cool.
And then this one down here, you might have to drop this number again, based on what you just talked about with that, the last, I think, I can't remember now, it's been a half an hour, I can't remember. If we settled on, was it 8,000 square feet? Did we,
I don't
I
think
don't
we
think- I
settled.
don't think we- Yeah, we don't think we.
I think it was, let's pull some examples and see.
okay, so I think this number matches up with whatever number
special
you settle on with the other one. So it's consistent.
Steve, I need to sign off now.
Okay.
Right, but I will.
Hi, JJ.
we'll see you
Okay.
next week.
Thank you. I'll be at the next meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Steve, let's keep going.
Yeah, and this is, we're getting closer to the end here. So some different requirements, another one related to stormwater. And I think I took this from, borrowed it from New Haven, who had, similar standards and a similar point system. So I took that one, which I thought was a pretty good one to say if you, again, this might be something we want to double check with the DPW standards on to make sure we're not giving them something they already have to do. I'll confirm that. But I think that's the idea, is to kind of increase a stormwater retention. And there was something else, and we had talked about sustainability back in, I think it was June, related to battery storage, which I thought was a neat concept. I don't know how applicable it will be in East Norwalk just based on the site size, but I'd like to look at a little language with that. I think that's an interesting option to have that in there as something that could benefit everybody if they had, sites, even though I have a typo there, even though they have smaller sites, maybe there's opportunities to have some battery storage where they can, provide power back into the area if and when it was ever needed. And I think this was maybe Anna's suggestion about the EV chargers being eligible for some points. If they do a level 3 charger versus what we typically see is a level 2 charger.
I don't remember making that suggestion. I don't know how well thought out it was. I mean, quite honestly, like I'm not an expert on EV chargers. In my mind, 3 is better than 2, so it seems like something that might be good for the amenity bonus points. But but I'm also aware that I don't have electronic vehicle and don't build buildings. Have you ran this idea
Well,
by people who know what
the
they're
only
talking about,
things-
right?
Aren't they for different kinds of cars? You know, some cars require,
No, and
No, you can have
an
adapters on
EV3 is a fast charger.
My thing here is that the developer can put it in and charge for it. It's not really like a public, there's no public utility here other than it's a place where I can charge, not that I'm getting anything for it. Right? Because they'll charge for it. So it's literally akin to putting a gas station in front of their building in a way, shape, or form.
But
Well,
this
this probably
charging,
would
like,
not be public. This would probably be private within their development.
Right.
I think the
Nope.
requirement, we
then
talked
we're
about
in
just
that- we're in that
requirements
section.
being
Sorry.
2,
Sorry, I thought we were in the.
and this
still
would bump
public,
it up to 3.
Oh, but then I'm in sync with this. Sorry.
I would just did somebody who knows more about this stuff looked at this, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've sent it out to, we just talked about it a little bit with Steve, but again, up for discussion, all these, as they all are.
Steve, unfortunately, it's probably not in our bailiwick. But there is the question of what people charge for electricity at these public charging stations. Is there a requirement, for example, to indicate what the charge is? You know, how much does it cost per kilowatt hour? So in the same way that when people buy gasoline, they know what they're paying per gallon.
You know that when you plug in, though. Your car
Because-
should tell you.
Pardon me?
Your car should tell you what is being charged when
Okay,
you plug in.
Yeah, if it's level 3 just for residents, I could see that being useful maybe for some residents who need a very quick charge. But my understanding is with level 3, you're using it mostly on like road trips, or if you need to charge up your car in like 20 or 30 minutes, from 20 to 80%. Like it's not terribly often people are using this except for road trips. And so this might be good on like our Route 1 corridor, for example, and maybe in a like mixed use development. But I would think in the residential context that we'd want to encourage maybe more level 2 availability, so that way more residents feel inclined to use electric cars. But that charge could happen over the course of say 4 or 8 hours instead of over 20-30 minutes. Feel free to fact check me for anyone who has more charging experience. I charged for the first time this past weekend, so.
So maybe this should be
Congratulations.
specified for public,
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was gonna suggest.
but
Okay.
but also running it by an expert.
yeah, I think how Chapin said it was
Please.
right. If I'm a resident, level 2 is gonna fit my needs because I'll be parked there probably overnight and can charge my car. But if I'm someone from the public and I'm shopping at a shop on the first floor, probably I have a half hour to an hour, and that gets me a full charge.
Then with the rain gardens, we just added a requirement that they, anything with the public art had to be viewable from the public. Because we had that pop up with one of the Van Zandt applications where some of the stuff was not visible and not accessible, so kind of like defeated part of the purpose of things. And this number is bound to change for the rooftop solar just based on what we talked about earlier with the 25,000 square feet possibly dropping down. So we'll have to look at that.
Same with the green roof above it, right?
Yeah, and I think maybe, I'm not sure if Ms. Wells had recommended we look at the same, the standards be applicable. So yeah, I would think so.
Dude, just a question on the green roof. If that looks like grass, how does that be kept alive?
I
I've
was
seen
thinking-
green roofs before, but they're more like succulent gardens and whatnot.
Yeah, so they have their own, I don't know what the requirements are in terms of, you know, if you're in a drought, do they have to be irrigated? That's a good question. I'm not positive about that, but they, you know, they're meant to be like a living roof, not just like, as opposed to a potted or raised beds. Of
Yeah,
that.
they're
They're
self-sustaining.
meant to absorb water, retain storm water. You know, that's kind of the intent.
Okay.
ELM in Stanford is implementing that.
Who is?
Sorry, Hector, I couldn't.
ELM, Eastern, no, it's a maintenance company in Stanford, ELM.
Building Land Technology, is that what you
Yeah,
mean,
I think
BLT?
it's a company that does maintenance and they do all of the setups for the, you know, like all the green spaces in Stanford for the town and for private, and they've started doing that. I can send you some information tomorrow because I am connected with one of the persons from the company and they were sending me what they are setting up.
Okay.
All right, Steve, let's move on.
And the last one, we came up with, if they do provide additional workforce housing units, you get 2 points for every additional 5% of additional workforce units you provide, with a maximum available of 4 points. So if they did another 10%, they could get 4 points.
How are we going to measure that last one?
Yeah, I'm,
Be part of their affordable housing plan.
yeah. So say they're building 20 units.
Mhm.
They have to provide, the regulations require that they provide 2 workforce units. If they provide 4 workforce units, then they can get 4 points.
Do we want to make that at a lower AMI than the workforce units? Or is that too complicated?
That adds a little bit of complexity to it. I mean, it's an option. I think the more
Complicated, the less we're gonna get.
yeah, or the more stringent the requirement, the less you're gonna get.
That's fair.
I would
And
think
with the understanding that after the results of the affordable housing study come out, we can reopen this if it seems to make sense to reduce the SMI, right?
Yeah, I think that will get reflected in the broader workforce housing regulations. And this is something we can easily discuss with them too. And maybe because if they identify that there's a, you know, which I'm sure they will, there's going to be a need for affordability below 60% SMI, for example, you could always you could add another category in there where you get different points for providing, you know, so you have 2 options here, one as it's written, or you have another one for if you provide 5% of the units at 50% SMI, you get points or something. You know, you have different options you could play with under that category.
somehow that number of 4, if we're trying to encourage more affordable housing, would seem low. Like,
Well, it's only 5, but you can go up. You can get more, right? Oh, that's total maximum of 4. So 2 points for every 5%. So you get,
Yeah, like why do we need a maximum?
well, because we require people to get I think a set of the sustainability out, so you can't do all of it via workforce housing increases.
Okay.
well,
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe-
you won't get some of it's trying to strike a balance between, you know, there's the sustainability requirement, that's a certain percent. And there's also trying to get that immediate public benefit as well as like the plazas and the nice spaces. But again, these numbers can all be tweaked and modified to move it up however you feel is appropriate.
okay.
Speaking of looking for the things that are more of the immediate public benefit, I know I wasn't involved when the whole amenity idea first came up, so I'm sure you guys have talked through all the options before, and I'm sort of disappointed that the response from ENNA didn't come in early enough for us to see that as part of this discussion. One idea I had, which I tell me if it's stupid, is having bonus points for public restroom access, particularly with, changing stations. I think in general, in terms of walkability and activating street use, access to public restrooms is something that's come up before. Obviously, it's not required, it's an amenity bonus, but I think that helps a community as well. And some of these places, they're going to have restaurants, but some of these places won't.
Yeah, I think that could be, I don't try to think of what appropriate point would be, but public accessible.
Is it a number 1 or a number 2, Steve? Number 1 or a number 2?
It's not a sustainability item. Is that what you're asking? Or
No, I was making a really bad joke about
Oh.
bathrooms and 1s and 2s.
All right, now I got you.
I'd like to see that gentleman muted for the rest of the meeting.
Here, here.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
By the way, it's 7:55. I'm perfectly willing to go another half hour or so in order to cover everything we have on the agenda. Is everyone else comfortable with that, running until 8:30?
Unfortunately, I have
Yes.
to log off.
Okay,
It may go a little longer than that, Mr. Chairman, if we get, it won't go that much longer, I promise.
I can't go another half hour. I'm just exhausted. Personally,
from last night.
yes.
All right, let's keep pushing forward.
So just, I want to just complete this. I know, Mr. Batchnik just mentioned the publicly accessible restroom. Would you want to add that as an amenity that's eligible for points? That's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, but do
That's
it.
my thought.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anybody have any idea on the point value for that? I could think about it. I haven't seen that anywhere where I can reference what anybody else has done, so.
I know Nick was kidding, but I think 1 or 2 is a good value for that.
I think higher, you're asking a building to maintenance a restroom. I mean, the 6th taxing district has public bathrooms at 3 of our properties. And it's a lot of work to maintain public bathrooms. It's not something that you take lightly. And there's issues that come with public bathrooms. So I would give it a lot more than 1 point. But
The only tricky thing with that is if it's a mixed use building and say they have a cafe or something, technically they've already got sort of a public restroom if it's got like indoor, outdoor access, so.
No, but typically restaurants limit the use of the restroom to people who are using the restaurant.
right.
I was thinking that they could even make like the restroom in their leasing office, for example, accessible to the
Right.
public. Something that's already maintained. And I don't think it needs to be a 24/7 restroom, but one that's open most hours.
Well, it becomes a security issue.
It has it, yeah.
Yeah, but they have to tell people it's open to the public. If it's in the leasing office, I don't think the public would realize that they can go in and use the bathroom.
Well, the same way we require signage for the other public spaces to make it clear that it's not restricted to residents. I mean, just, you get whatever it is, whatever Tammy thinks. 3 points or 4 points for one gender neutral accessible bathroom with a changing station that's available to the public during the hours that the commercial businesses are open.
I think it's a great idea.
Sounds like good language too.
Well, I don't remember what I just said, so.
That's all right, the staff did.
Right, you're being recorded.
Was that 3 points?
3.
3, all right.
Whatever Tammy thinks is best.
3 sounds good.
Okay, what's
Per
the next?
toilet.
That's fine.
3 points per toilet.
Let's not complicate the issue.
Just
Mr.
kidding.
Chairman, what's the next item, so if I can click to where we're gonna go?
The next item you show is corner store neighborhood retail limitations.
All right, that's right, that's the one I have to change my share screen on.
I'm sorry to bring this up, but what was that rent reduction? Was that for commercial space? Because
Correct.
it's the ground floor. It didn't say commercial. Is that,
It might be specified elsewhere, but if not, I'll take another look at that.
yeah, all right, it's a good idea. I just didn't, couldn't figure out if that was residential or commercial right there. In that bullet point. Anyway, we can scroll on.
Yes, as soon as I find where that document is. All right, is that large enough for everybody?
Yeah, that's good.
So these are a lot of the same criteria that we've talked about several times. We looked at it again, and we thought that what we've included here is just probably the most appropriate and kind of accomplishes what you guys really looking for, which is the intent to allow some of these smaller, uses within the residential zone to provide the opportunity where somebody's not as car dependent for every trip for things, but then also try to put some constraints around the proliferation and, how wide a canvas that these can encompass. So this is kind of where we've landed as our recommendations.
Why is corner lot back
Yeah.
on there? I thought we had talked
I
about
thought
last
we
time.
took that out.
Me too.
No, I thought we circled around back on that as undecided.
Oh, well.
But anything's up for discussion, but we think,
I think it's important that it's called the corner store, option, but that it not be restricted to corners,
I agree.
just to confuse people.
You could put corner lot or corner store in quotes, but it shouldn't have to be
Yeah.
on a corner lot.
We can also
Neighborhood-
call it neighborhood retail, like call it what it is if you want.
Neighborhood
to.
retail.
Yeah, neighborhood store limitations, neighborhood
Yeah,
store.
so in the regulations, it's going to be retail because otherwise we have to add a new use and it just makes more work. So it's going to be retail with all these, whatever limitations you guys decide upon.
I would vote to strike number 5.
So moved.
I'm with you.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, that sounds unanimous. Let me scroll down.
With striking a 5, then you probably have to add back in that separation distance. I can't remember what we.
Yep, there's right,
Yes.
that's number 7.
Okay.
No temporary signs, portable signs, or banners. What's that about?
So doesn't look like it's a flea market, doesn't look like they have 50 banners of those floaty things that go around in the wind, just to try to, it should look like the rest of the neighborhood.
Hmm.
So they're allowed to have signs, but they're not allowed to put up big banners and have things out in the street with advertising things.
No wacky inflatable men in the
No
parking
wacky
lot.
inflatables and
I think the new bagel place first had some temporary portable signage to alert the neighbors that there's a new store. It made a whole lot of sense.
We
Yeah, we
do
do
allow that
grand
in
opening.
for 30 days when a business opens.
Oh, okay, then that's fine.
We're not completely.
And that's a redundant note here, number 17, because it's already in our sign language, I believe.
Yeah, it's a little belts and suspenders on that one.
Yeah, okay. I think this all looks good to me.
Cool. I think it's a huge win.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right, hallelujah. All right, we're moving quick.
Okay, you've got village districts and view sheds, public views and vistas.
I want to get to view sheds, so do you want to do that first, or
Yeah,
That is the next item.
Oh, there's
Oh.
Mill Hill. I see it, Mike.
yeah. Yeah, I thought this language was great. And it applies to Pinckney Park and Rowayton, as well as Mill Hill. And it's to preserve views and vistas. I think this is just makes a lot of sense. And it does fit in with the CAM law, which deals with seeing scenic corridors or scenic value. Is that correct, staff? Steve and Brian?
Yeah, I'd say this one was Brian's baby, so I think he did a good job with this one.
Tammy, this aligns with the what folks at the 6th taxing district have been saying for quite some time.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All good?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And is the next one, Mr. Chairman, is the next item related to the CD3 zone?
Yeah, CD3C, height and density clarification.
Okay. So we had talked about a couple different things. So what you're looking at right now, I know it says 4C, but that's the old 4C, which is now 3C. We had talked about in that zone, I can pull up the map if you'd like, but that zone basically is the Route 1 corridor and Main Ave. The idea initially was to allow, as of right, 6 stories and then 1 unit per every 1250, as opposed to what the current standard is, 4 stories and 1 per 1650. Staff, mainly me, is recommending that we go back to the initial standard, which is the 4-story max and the 1650. Well, and the reason being it is that in the POCD, it recommends along like the Route 1 corridor and Main Ave, developing significant nodes as mixed-use clusters. And what I'd like to do is post adoption of this probably sometime later in mid to late 2024 is look at the significant nodes. Like I can think of a few, like where Richards Ave come in, or a couple other main cross routes of Route 1, and then look at developing higher density at those nodes specifically. So then that's the location you would go up to the 6 stories, and that's where you would add the additional density. But in exchange for doing that, then we apply a similar point system like we just talked about to the EVTZ, where if they want to achieve additional height and additional density, that they have to give us back other items in exchange for that. So I think as opposed to just putting this blanket increase in height and density across all of Route 1, we confine it to where it's really appropriate and really activate those key intersections.
Okay, so Steve, you're going to come back to us on this with a list of those locations?
No, I'm not going to do anything now. I'm just going to say what the recommendation is for now is to drop this
Yes.
one per 1250 to put it back to the original 1 per 1650, and then put this 6 to 4. That's the only change we're recommending now.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's smart. And I like the node idea.
Yeah, as a side note, we've had it in the budget for 2 years and it didn't make it, but we got it through the last capital budget. Was an extension to our GIS program where we can do 3D modeling, which is actually really easy to use on the staff level. So we're going to be able to do a lot of the mapping and planning out of these areas versus what you see from the consultants. So I think it's a big win for us going forward.
What if we took a middle ground of leaving it, dropping down to 4, but leaving it at the 1250?
I mean, I think it's something you could think about. What I'm thinking is that 1250 number could be bumped up even higher than that at those key areas. So I think, or you could have a sliding scale based on where it is. But my recommendation for now is to leave it to match the current zoning. I don't think you lose much by leaving it, because I don't think you're going to see. I think if folks know that we're looking at doing this at certain areas, that's going to activate those areas even more, and people will hold off on projects pending the outcome of that analysis.
Maybe, I don't know, but
Well, it's an attempt to get away from the gas station on every corner look. You know, that is just so
Totally.
kind of obsolete, and then having, you know, denser nodes, all that makes sense. But, you know, the number, that number of square feet, as it goes up, it becomes less dense.
Right.
We look at maybe something like 1,500 square feet or 1,400 square feet, something that's a little bit less than what it is now, but not quite 1,250, and keep the 4 stories.
I mean, it's up to you what you guys would like to do. Like, again, don't ask me where 1 per 1650 came up from. There's no magic to this. There's, you know, I'm a big fan of round numbers. I don't like 1650 and 1450 it doesn't make sense to me because lots are not all the same. Lots vary, you know, I can understand 1 per 500 and what that equates to, more so in terms of parking impacts and unit size, that number lines up better. So, I mean, again, I'm not married to any of this.
The point of clarification, the density 1 dwelling unit per 1,250 square feet. Does that mean that, is that an overall number per unit, or is that saying that
That's
you
per lot
can't
for the
have-
lot area.
I'm sorry?
That's for the lot area. So whatever the size of the property is in square
Gotcha.
feet. So say it's an acre, which is 43,560. You divide that by that 1,250 or the 1650 or whatever that number is, and that tells you how many units you can put there.
It's kind of, it's another way of using floor area ratio, but not exactly FAR.
Oh, I see. Because I was saying nobody's going to be able to build a 4-story building on, you know, a quarter of an acre. But so that's how you divide it up. Okay.
Yeah.
I got you.
And isn't our standard in like our denser areas like South Norwalk 800 or 850?
It's 500.
Oh, 500, right. The number 850 came up recently. Where's that? In
A
just
couple
as an-
spots. I think East Norwalk
So-
has that as one of the standards.
right.
But this
You know, the
area is
true-
currently 1650. So right now we're just talking about whether we should change it.
Yeah, and the true form-based code doesn't even look at a number. They don't regulate it. They say, do what you want to do.
Well,
Yeah, but we are.
I'm all for
Right.
updating this, but you want to just stay safe and keep it where it is until we have more information on where we would want to increase the density.
I think we should keep it the way it
That's
is.
the staff recommendation.
Yeah, so I guess, so I would say err on the side of you know, being safer, keep it where it is now. Or, I mean,
I think we're making enough changes that unless somebody from the community, whether it's the building community or the people living here or wanting to live here community is asking for it or the staff is recommending it, I don't see why we should look to change it.
and I'm off, just for the record, I'm all for increasing the housing in those business districts, you know, the commercial corridors, Westport Avenue and Connecticut Avenue, because we do make it more walkable and people can walk out. You know, there was a time, I remember, I've been around here about 25 years, but I remember there's very little housing along Connecticut Avenue. Now we have a couple of big projects and there's a lot more people walking. They walk down Richards Avenue on that new sidewalk. And I see people walking now all over Connecticut Avenue. It's really remarkable how when you build sidewalks, people use them.
But we want to make changes based on like research and recommendations. And if the staff is saying that they want to look into this, they think we should look into this more before making changes, like why not look into it more?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah, I
we good with leaving the number where the staff's recommending?
I am.
Yeah,
If I can jump in for just really quick, I think the idea with the way the code is set up is that over time you can adjust these numbers and adjust the boundaries of the zones. So if you find that you need more capacity, you can increase that number 10 years from now, or 3 years from now, whenever it is. You can start there and then just bump it up as demand arises.
Okay. Is that it, Steve?
For that one, is there anything else? Are we?
No, there's nothing else on the agenda.
Okay, I just wanted to show you really quick the website update. And this feeds into, talking about the schedule. We did update the page and changed kind of the front text to kind of point people in the hopefully right direction on where they can find the changes that you've been deliberating on for a long time. The individual articles that are here have the red line edits in them, so you can click on that and hover over the text and you can see what changes that you've made. The one item which actually reflects all the changes is not red line, is the use table. So you can click on the use table. It has the new zone added in, has all the changes that you guys have agreed to date. We have to go back and double check they got all the edits, but they said they did, so we're going to roll with that for now. But they added the new zone in, added the new uses in, changed the limitations and we changed SPU to SPUL when there's limitations. So we added all that in. Hopefully that piece, I think people will look at that quite closely. And we've updated the mapping to reflect the change in the zoning nomenclature and the change of the additional zone. So that information is all up to date. And down below, we also added in all the staff memos are here. The edits table that you guys have been reviewing is all here, and it's linked up above into the text. So everything should be pretty much up to date. As far as I can tell, it's all there.
All right, Steve, why don't you go over the calendar?
Sure.
Wait, before we get there, can I ask a question about what you're going over, Steve?
Yeah.
Is there a red line for the full version, not broken out by sections?
No, it's just by the article,
Just by the article.
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem is with the PDFs, when you put the red line edits, the file size just gets really difficult to manage. So it was easier to break them down.
Okay. And is there an info sheet explaining the zone names change?
Hold on, I'm not sure why that clicked on there. I think there is, right, Brian? You did one, right?
Yes, let me
Yeah,
see.
right here, right? I'm hovering over it right now.
Yep.
Oh, okay, that's a little hard to.
And it's in the
Steve, it would be great if you made that little sheet like you gave one to JJ and me that actually spelled out the words of what it meant for the public.
And if you scroll down to where the other info sheets are.
I think we added it here too. That was the plan.
Is
that
it there?
the same one, Brian?
Yeah, that's where I'm looking for it.
I can replace that document. Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought we did that, but we'll do that.
Okay.
Give it a key like you did. That was great.
Oh, you want, update the kind of cheat sheet? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful to the
Yeah. I
residents.
can do that. That's easy enough to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve, the calendar.
Yeah, I don't have a calendar. I can pull up my Outlook calendar. The one thing we had talked about was we have the 2 public hearings scheduled for December 5th and December 6th. And then, you're going to be looking at my Outlook calendar, which is not helpful. And then you were going to meet a week later to go over the comments, deliberate, and potentially take action. The one date we don't have on the calendar, which is probably a good idea, which you talked about, was having like a public preview of the changes before the public hearing. I don't think that everybody needs to be there for that. As many people obviously are welcome to attend as possible, but we should have a quorum for that. The tricky part is I'd rather not do it a week before. I'd rather give people a couple of weeks, even though the information's already been up there for a little while. So we were talking, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. If I have the dates wrong, I think Monday, the 21st, or
Monday's the 20th or
Tuesday.
Tuesday the 21st.
Gotcha. So the November 20th or 21st, which is a Monday and a Tuesday, of having like a special meeting from like 6 to 7:30, wouldn't be public comment. Again, it would just be staff explaining. So the video is out there of what the changes are since everybody's last seen the document. We go over the changes to the mapping, including the nomenclature, adding the other zone, explaining the uses that got changed, not going into every word in detail, but saying, we've added these uses here, we've changed the table to reflect that, and then summarizing some of the technical changes that were made, in a more so probably in like the more urban zone. So here's some of the changes we made and why we made them. So I think it would take like an hour or so to do the presentation, just so the public has a little sense of what's happened since they last were in front of the commission.
Are you gonna do that all via Zoom, Steve?
Send out an email to all of us asking about our availability. So we make sure we're going to have a quorum for that meeting.
Sorry, is that gonna be hybrid or Zoom?
That one I'm planning completely virtual since there's no
Virtual,
public
okay.
participation at that meeting.
Great.
The two
Is
public
there-
hearings in the evening that we vote will be public meetings or hybrid if we have a commissioner or two who can't make it.
Is
Yeah, I
there,
think
a-
it'd have to be hybrid either way.
when you did the district, when you did your 20 meeting roundabout to districts and community groups, people were allowed to ask questions and get answers, and it seemed like that was really positive. I understand obviously the difference between a formal public hearing and not, but I really wonder about why we can't use the Q&A feature in Zoom to allow people to submit questions and get answered. And you don't have to answer if somebody submits a question saying like, why are you so ugly? Like, it doesn't have to be answered. It doesn't have to be public. People use these features all the time, but to allow for some amount of dialogue that seemed to go very positively in the spring.
Well, I mean, you're doing two nights of public hearings, so
I know, but the public
mean,
hearings aren't
you
interactive,
already-
and the public hearings are more people sharing their opinions about what's been proposed. I mean, I know they ask questions, and the end of all of it, the applicant can answer the question. I don't know.
They're sharing their feelings about what they think has been proposed, not necessarily what has been actually proposed, which is a problem because you can't, nobody can correct it.
I just feel like the ability for Q&A in the spring was really positive, and a lot of changes have happened since then. And it seems like if there's any way to do that again through this presentation prior to the public hearing, it might be valuable. But if legally it's not possible because the public hearing, I guess it was opened in June and it's still open, it's one public hearing. If that's not allowed, it's not allowed. But I just wanted to put that out there. I wish there were more opportunities for us to just have Q&A.
Anna, I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. And I think we can, as a commission or planning and zoning staff, can reduce frustration level and correct errors. People, let's just say, oh, you're allowing 20-foot buildings and or 20-story buildings, and it can just calmly like, no, the maximum building height is, and correct misinformation. And it does, I think it promotes a better dialogue with the residents if you can do that.
Could we allow Q&A and just kind of vet them at the end and go through them at the end of that presentation?
That's how the Q&A feature in Zoom works. People put in the Q&A. Nobody can see the questions asked except for the host, or if they let the panelists see. you decide which ones to answer, and you answer them. You can answer them in writing so that everybody can see it, or you can choose to, hold it and answer verbally.
Maybe Brian or Steve, maybe there's a staff member who could address those questions as they come in. And I think where you're going is a good idea, Anna, where there's a little more dialogue in that meeting, the presentation meeting before the hearing.
Well, I think Steve and Brian are the ones who are going to have to answer the questions. I don't think we can assign this to another staff member.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Your
that's something
feelings
we
about
can
it,
do. I was
Steve?
planning on. No, I
Well,
think that's
there's
fine.
no
Yeah, I think
requirement to
that's
answer them.
right.
It would just be we could do a sample selection at the end to save time, because you could spend an hour answering questions.
It'll be more than an hour. Steve, your feeling about it?
I think, depending on the volume, sure, sounds doable.
Okay, Nick?
Do we need to do anything to prepare for the 13th not being enough for our vote? Like, do we need to think of the 14th as a extra day ahead of time or notice anything? I would just hate for us to get to the 13th and get close, and for whatever reason feel like we need some more time. Maybe that's a silly proposition, but I would hate for us to have to then go into the following week if that was the case for notification or anything like that.
For special meetings, I think
24
Steve-
hours.
Yeah, 24 hours had in advance.
Okay, so we can go at the end of our meeting. Well, you'd have to notice it like at the start, right? Would you get to 10 p.m. and say we're done? Could we start at 6 the next day?
Yeah, you'd have to do it for the 15th at that point.
At that point,
Yeah, I think you'd have to do it for the 15th.
48 hours. Yeah.
that'd be that Friday, unless we notice it now as like a placeholder, right?
What's the process for canceling a meeting? Let's say if we do finish, say on that Wednesday, right? We don't need the Friday. Is it easy enough to just post a notice saying
Yeah.
we are not meeting anymore?
Yep.
Canceling is the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'd rather say Wednesday, Thursday, back to back. I would hate to a day between the two. If
And
we don't
Friday's not a good night for a meeting.
Yeah, God no.
Including for the public too, for them to be able to come in and listen. So I like the idea of pre-reserving that Thursday, and if we can get through things, great. If not, have that available.
Well, it'd be less stress, right? We would just reduce the stress level to come to a conclusion that night. But it would be great if we did, but just to have that as a backup. I think that's a good idea.
So Steve,
Why
where,
don't you just take a look at the calendar and see if that's even possible. We can talk about this more next Wednesday night as well.
And I'm just for the record, I'm good for either that Monday or Tuesday of the what was that, the 20th?
21st.
Yeah.
I should be good too.
I mean, it's easier right now for us to just say if we're okay on both those nights instead of an email.
Yeah, well,
I'd like the email because of the number of people we're missing.
Right. Well, I'm good for both nights. So anyway.
but are we meeting on the 22nd of November?
There's no scheduled meeting for that.
Okay.
No,
And
that's the day
nor
before
the 29th.
Thanksgiving.
Right, I'm not advocating for it, I just wanna, and the
Yeah, we were
29th,
not
nothing,
meeting that.
I
whole
wrote off my
episode.
Wednesday nights a long time ago. It's Wednesday, it's zoning.
Steve or somebody, can you send out a memo with all of these dates? So I want to be sure I've got them on my calendar.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll send one email
Thanks
out.
so much.
Okay, good. Do we have any further business?
Can I just ask, Steve, have you heard anything about the research being done within TMP on the residential parking permits for East Norwalk, when we might get a presentation of that researcher's findings?
I have not. I can follow up. I haven't talked to those guys in a little bit, so I can do that.
Thank you so much.
This is a little bit off topic, but I'm sure it's important to most of us, that Manresa property has been sold. I'm curious how that was kept so quiet. And are any of the zoning changes that we are about to make, will that have an impact on that property? Did anybody meet those people, Steve, in your office? The purchasers, Avant-Garde Properties?
Yes,
or-
more to come, but not tonight.
Darn.
I yes,
I quit.
I have, so I know it's.
A special
Yeah.
meeting, we shouldn't be discussing it tonight.
Yeah, you'll get some information coming up about that.
Well, it would be okay to just say, because it was on the front page of the Hour on Sunday or Saturday, or no, earlier this week, what day it was, I don't remember, it was a front page article saying that they want to just build single family homes and have, and
It's
that's,
currently zoned single family and it's
Yeah.
zoned single family in the proposal in the rewrite.
and that was the buyer, the purchaser saying that, and that's public record, so that's not, I'm just throwing it out there in case anybody missed that article in the Hour. I think it was either Sunday or Monday.
Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, Lou, Tammy.
Okay, Tammy has made the motion, Chapin has seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Looks unanimous. Look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday night.
Thank you. Lou.
And take care.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks all.